Welcome to KGPT's Wichita's Biz That Is. I'm Tim Witzman, president of the Wichita Independent Business Association, and my guest today is someone who has been the chair of WIBA, Cindy McSwain, and Cindy's with Allen, Gibbs, and Houlik, sometimes AGH, right?
Yes.
Welcome. Glad to have you.
Good to be here.
We're always interested in a person's background. Tell me a little bit about what brought you to AGH.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start out a little bit to say what even brought me into the accounting realm.
Yes.
But I grew up in a very small town, 1,800 people, and when I went to college, didn't really want to know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and actually started out as a music major. And
Hey, all right.
didn't know that, did you?
Yeah.
And I had an older...
But that's left brain.
That is
Makes
left
sense.
brain. That is left brain, which explains a lot of things about me as an accountant. But as I kind of went, after the first year, I decided I didn't know if that was exactly the way I wanted to go, and my older brother was an accountant, so you always follow down the familial path. And so that's why I decided to kind of become an accountant. I was fortunate enough during college to do an internship, which I recommend to everybody that's out there because you're going to know if you like it or not. And did my internship in Wichita, not with AGH, but down here in Wichita. Found that I loved public accounting. And
What was it that you loved?
What
Tell
did
me
I-
a little. Yeah, I mean, as a kid, first experience, what was it you liked?
I think that's where some of the left brain stuff kicks back in. And it's the same thing that I love today. It's the challenge and the mix-up and the variance and sometimes even the chaos in there. I have students today ask me what I love about my job, and then they turn right around and ask me what I don't like about my job, and it's the exact same thing. It's I go into work every day and I don't know what's going to happen. And so I like that. I'm not a very methodical person, and so I like that chaos in my world, if you will.
And you bring order.
Sometimes I make the chaos. No, I do try to bring order to that world. And so that's what makes it fun, is I never know what to expect when I'm going into work. And then on the flip side, that's what also makes it very stressful and tense, is I never know what's going to happen, or what I think is going to happen for the day ends up out the window and I'm doing something totally different.
Right.
But as a college student, that's kind of what I saw. And I liked that I was always doing something different and working with different clients and getting inside different clients' businesses and seeing what makes the owners tick and what makes their companies tick. And that's what really kind of excited me into it.
Very cool.
So all through a college internship experience, decided that's what I was going to do with the rest of my life.
Okay, and then you did what after that?
When I graduated from college, I actually went back to work for about 5 years for that employer, who I did my internship with. And then out of the blue one day, a church colleague of mine actually called me and said they were looking for somebody over at AGH and wanted to know if I was interested. So it was just kind of a fluke that I went and I saw, I liked what I saw, liked where the company was going, the philosophy that was there, and so I made the jump, which was hard, going from competitor to competitor, and I've been there for 20 plus years since.
Wow. Yeah, I made the comment on another show that several of the guys in Monty Python came from backgrounds where their families wanted them to be chartered accountants, and they didn't want to be. They escaped reasonably well, I think.
Yeah.
But you went the other way.
Yeah. A lot of people think...
Well, I know. I did music theater, but I thought, not for a living.
Yeah, that's kind of what I came down to. It was a lot of fun, and so I've taken that music and have been able to do other things with it, directing church choirs and some things like that, but not my living.
Yeah, well, that explains one of your kids in the Madrigals, and we had a program for a WIBA luncheon.
Yeah.
One of your kids.
All three of my kids have kind of explored that music track a little bit. It helps to, I'm a big proponent of all kinds of the arts, that it makes a better, well-rounded individual.
All five of mine did. In fact, all five of them appeared in a Music Theater Wichita show at one point or another. Okay, now did you arrive before or after AGH became AGH?
After.
Okay.
After.
But not long after.
Not long after. Actually, when I interviewed as a college student with them, they were of another name. And then when I actually joined them about 5 years later, it had become AGH. So,
Well, before we talk more about your experiences and things that you've learned, tell me a little bit about, I think the AGH story is very interesting as to how that came about.
Okay.
Can you tell us some of that?
Sure. Well, the firm, the roots go all the way back to the 1930s when it was formed as a locally owned CPA firm. And what that means is the owners are local. There's not typically more than one office, and everybody and all the decisions are made here in Wichita. Over the years, it operated as a local firm for a long time, and then it hooked up and became a branch office of a national firm. That was probably in the 70s time frame. Operated as a national office of Maine-Herdman, Maine-LaFrance.
The accounting firms change names all the time.
Have cycled all over the place. And then in the 80s, in the mid 80s, 87, that firm was getting ready to merge in with one of the big 8 at the time, now down to the big 4. And the owners, the partners in the local Wichita office at that time made the decision to not go in with that merger and to actually buy out that practice and take it local. And I believe, if my memory serves me right, that they were only one of a couple of offices that made that decision, and I know the other office is in Topeka.
Well, at the time, I remember all the discussion because I worked a lot with accountants, and including that firm.
Yeah.
When I was with the county, and boy, people thought everything was going to the nationals. There might be little practices,
right?
But there was no room in the market at all for a kind of mid-sized accounting company. You either had to be a biggie, or you were more like a mom and pop almost.
Right. What I have kind of found in our practice is that we've got the best of both worlds. So we're big enough that we can hook up with some of the nationals, and we actually affiliate with a national affiliate. We're not owned by, so that we can utilize some resources and some references there.
So we're going to take a break.
Okay.
And we'll come back, finish that thought in just a moment with more of Wichita's Biz That Is. Welcome back to Wichita's Biz That Is, and our guest today, Cindy McSwain from Allen, Gibbs & Houlik, accounting firm. And we were back talking about when that firm decided to break away from a national, buy things out, and go on their own. And I interrupted you.
Most fine. We were talking about how what I've been able to see is that it's really the best of both worlds, of having a local firm, and we are locally owned. Everything is headquartered here in Wichita. In fact, Wichita's our only office. But yet we're large enough and have the resources internally. We're running about 130 employees right now. Some of those are actually based outside of Wichita, but our brick and mortar is only here. But we've got the expertise and the professionalism that we think our clients need and can find in a national sized firm, but we've got it here on the ground.
What was the reason back then that people thought you just couldn't do that? Because they were very much bucking the trend.
Right. The diversity of services and the expertise, it's kind of hard to find that. And if you don't have, it's very hard for an individual to know everything. And so the accounting profession tends to get very specialized in some of those services. And so it was bucking the trend to be able to build those different service sectors, if you will, to be able to provide that and not have to go to some big city, Chicago, Dallas, New York, to be able to get that.
It was a pretty good sized firm because I know you had a government practice, Mark Dick, one of the best in the country that I worked with when I was at the county. So you had, it was pretty broad.
Yeah, I think at the time of the merger, and I'm going on history here, but we probably had 40, 50, 60 employees at that time. We've doubled since then and have added services around that. One of the things that we did to help that, because it's difficult to go from a national firm level down to a local firm level, and so the owners at that time were wise beyond their years and put a lot of things in place to help mitigate some of those factors, and that was to join up with an alliance of firms similar to us across the country, tucked under a firm that at the time was McGladrey and Poland. They've changed names a couple times since then as well. But and like I said, we don't share any ownership there. But
so how did that work? I mean, is it work that has to be done in another state? Is that why you have the connection, or
just
what?
the types
For
of
expertise,
expertise that we may not have had, educational resources, training resources. Assistance if we were getting into an area that we were a little unfamiliar with and needed some help, and also to utilize if we do go to another state, another country, etc. So it was kind of a little bit of a springboard or a security blanket at that time, if you will, to help us out until the firm was able to gather those resources all on our own. Pretty much these days, we stand pretty much alone.
Gotcha. Tell me about you within the organization, sort of what you were doing when you started and your progression on that.
Okay. When I first started in my career, I was doing a little bit of tax work, a little bit of audit work. When I moved to AGH, I moved into the audit department formally and kind of grew up as an auditor. And that was exciting because I got to go out to a lot of companies and see the inside workings of those companies and industries all across the board. And pretty fascinating to me to be able to see some of the things on the inside.
And I've done some of that. I ran internal audit in governments.
Yeah.
Put people in jail, actually.
Yeah. Yeah,
didn't want to. Some of them were my friends.
Yeah, saw some fraud out there, but got to see companies that were making airplane parts, and you could actually see the bomber buttons on the. They weren't gear shifters, but so just some of the things that you got to see that you wouldn't normally get to see was pretty fascinating. About 10 years ago, I was afforded the opportunity within my firm to move out of the auditing department and to head up an outsourcing department, and that's where I've been ever since. And that's been a lot of fun. A lot of people question me why I would do that, but it's been a lot of fun. When I first moved into that department, it was basically a bookkeeping department, and that's pretty much all we were doing. After the fact, people would give us their information, and we did data entry and create something off of it. But things have really evolved over the years, and that's with the onset of technology, et cetera. But customers that we're dealing with now, they can do most of that on their own. They can input the data and write their own checks, but they really just want some financial assistance and almost more consulting. And so that's what's been really fun, is to really go out and help those businesses grow from something small to evolve into whatever they dream and desire to be.
So that area has grown, I assume.
It has. It's grown a lot, and I see, and that's in both the private sector and in the governmental sector. I'm seeing a lot of that happening as well. So inside of our outsourcing area, we've got both accounting and payroll, and payroll is it used to be payroll was payroll, and even that's becoming more. It's kind of like all the tax laws. It's becoming more and more complicated as people move into more states and
harder for smaller companies too.
Absolute regulation. Regulation.
I mean, the feds, their own Department of Labor, have come out. It's like 38% more expensive per employee for regulation, and on some things like taxes, 3 times as expensive. On EPA stuff, 4 times as expensive per employee, which is why you're seeing fewer small businesses form.
Absolutely. And even some of the larger businesses that fall under the Affordable Care Act, that's the one that we're kind of hammering on now, is what are all the new regulations that are taking place and going to be impacting this year. So
yeah, I had a lady contact me yesterday. I was trying to in fact, I was going to ask her to be on this show. She was a member, and she's taking another job, and the reason is they can't afford the ACA.
Yeah,
she's going to go become an employee, and she just said, I can't do it.
Yeah, from an accountant standpoint, it's our bread and butter, and it's how we, as long as they're out there always making and changing laws, unfortunately it helps us stay in business and bring in new business. But
I've noticed that.
Yeah, it's tough, but that's really where our consulting lies. We have to become experts on all the new regulations that are really just hammering businesses out there.
Yeah, I don't think people who've never owned a business understand all the forms, the reports that people have to do, and you have to stop what you do to make money to do that.
Yeah.
And there is, for us, there is no HR department. There's no finance department. I'm it.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely.
So you do it all.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've assisted several foreign-owned companies who want to start up businesses in the aerospace industry here in Wichita, and just the cultural differences. And then they look at the regulations we have, and you know, that's one of my funnest
We'll
things.
come back to that in a moment on the last segment of Wichita's Biz That Is. Welcome back to Wichita's Biz That Is. I'm Tim Witzman, and this is Cindy McSwain from Allen, Gibbs & Houlik, who's our guest today. She was talking about foreign companies coming in and seeing the amount of regulation. I'll tell you one funny story. I met a teenager from Russia, and I never like to ask, do you like this or do you not like? So I just, what are your observations? What differences do you see? She said, you have so many rules. She said, you have so many more rules. And I've talked to people who've been in Denmark, just about rules on the street. They assume people actually are adults and know what to do. And we have a rule for everything.
Yeah, when and where you can walk across the street.
Well, I mean, just very restrictive on stuff.
Absolutely, that's true. And businesses are carrying the brunt.
I know, and usually put in place by people who have no concept of what it's like to run that business. Let's talk about changes. You've been there 20 years, so what has changed in the accounting field? What's different?
Probably on the accounting side, the biggest thing that I've seen is more of a globalization. And even some of the accounting regulations have changed. So
they're trying to harmonize some.
Harmonize between countries, and even on the tax side, we're seeing a lot more companies who are actually going and doing some trade either in or out with other countries. And so international has, even the very small companies are starting to do some of that. So from both a tax standpoint and from a financial reporting standpoint, it's important to be able to harmonize. That's a good word around the world.
And we're trying to get more Wichita companies to export. And we're one of the biggest exporters in the world. We're usually between number 1 and 3 in terms of our exports to population in the country. And I know Karen Page and the Global Trade Center are really working on getting more people to export.
Right.
Is that the only change? I mean, technology has to have changed the business.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was just talking with one of my staff this morning who's still finishing up her college degree, and we were talking about technology and dating myself back to the Green Ledger paper, heaven forbid. And she
goodness, I did batch processing when I ran $2 billion budgets.
And she asked me, well, what is that? What's Green Ledger paper? And I said, you don't want to know. So technology has been great. It's, every day there's a better, faster, easier way to do something. And what that has really changed is from, so many people, when I say I'm an accountant, they think I crunch numbers. I let the technology do that. Accountants have really, I think what has changed has become more consultative role. And all the green bar stuff from back in the day, where you were actually crunching numbers and using the adding machine, we're letting technology do that today.
The one thing that bothers me, and has bothered me since the 70s, is as we've used more technology, I don't think people understand the numbers. And I think you can see that even in things like NASA when they messed up the telescope, not paying attention to English versus metric. But I see people, and I've had people for 30 years bring numbers into me, and I say, well, that's off.
Yeah.
On one of them, that $2 billion budget, it's off by $30 million. Like, oh no, it's 3 in the morning and they've done batch processing. They don't want to go back to work on it.
Right.
But there's a tendency for people to lose track of what the numbers mean.
Right. And that is an issue because specifically we're letting technology do it, and we've become more consultative. That means we have to be more intuitive about what's really going on and the movements that are going on in those numbers and understanding them.
I'm sorry, I know I'm off on a digression, but when I watch things like Apollo 13, what strikes me is how creative those guys were with their slide rules in figuring something out with very little to work with. Compared to people, I'm not sure people could do that today. I'm not sure they could
Certain can.
think on their feet
right.
fast enough to be able to solve the problem.
Yeah, because we can't Google it.
Well, I love Googling.
Google's a wonderful thing.
It's great
but-
for research. I mean, I find that's the biggest help for me of all the technology is the ability to do research. But
Right. You know, I remember we had some folk who were just recently taking the CPA exam, and even that has changed just because of technology. It used to be a 3.5-day written exam, and now it's they take it in quarters, and it's all on the technology. But it's become really important, and there's so many rules and regulations out there, so it's important to be familiar with them and know of them so that then you can go use technology to go find them.
Exactly.
It used to be, we knew them all.
Yeah.
Verbatim.
Yeah.
Memorized.
Lawyers, similar thing, I think.
Exactly.
Since you went that way, you were talking about a new person coming in, what would you tell young people as they're preparing? I mean, not even strictly to be in accounting, but what do you think people should know? What are they missing, maybe?
I serve on an advisory council for my alma mater university, and so I get this question all the time. But to teach people how to work in teams, which they hate. Everybody hates the team project or the group project in college, but it really is important because that's the way not only in accounting firms but businesses as a whole. Everybody has to work as a team. You have leaders, you have followers, so that's important. And then communication skills, whether they're written or whether they're oral, verbal, just being able to communicate what it is you're trying to say. Those are the two big areas that I see.
I just finished reading U.S. Grant's memoirs, and the thing that struck me is this is the clearest writer of all the people I've ever read in history. And even his wife in their first meeting said the same thing. She said, he described something. It was the clearest description I've ever heard in my life. Boy, what a talent.
Right. Yeah, and to be able to put that in layman's English.
Absolutely. Any other advice for them? Or thoughts?
Be confident and go for what they want.
Oh, I agree.
The world is waiting.
I used to have problems, it's no longer so much the case, but with sometimes women who wouldn't try for jobs and stuff. I said, take it. Well, I'm not. Don't take a job you're totally prepared for.
Yeah. No, exactly. You're not going to learn anything if you know everything going in. So every
But
day's
we've
a challenge.
learned a lot today from Cindy McSwain on Wichita's Biz That Is, and we'll see you the next time.